Boys and girls, today you're going to be listening to Chapter 5 of Goony Bird. Chapter 5 is why Goony Bird was late for school, because she was directing a symphony orchestra. Chapter 5. Don't forget to pause it when you come to a character. Look for the setting, a problem, and a solution. On Tuesday, all the children, including Felicia Ann, arrived at school early, even Malcolm, who had never been early before. Trisha had a flower in her hair. Ben was wearing a vest. Kiko had a tiny bit of pink lipstick on her lips. And Barry Tuckerman was wearing a polka dot bow tie. Good morning, class, Mrs. Pigeon said. Don't you all look nice today? You do too, Mrs. Pigeon, the children all said. Mrs. Pigeon blushed. Well, she said, I thought I'd wear my new shoes today. Usually Mrs. Pigeon wore soft, comfortable shoes, but today she was wearing very shiny heeled shoes with gold buckles. The principal, Mr. Leroy, made announcements on the intercom. He announced a bake sale and a birthday and a meeting of the crossing guards. A fifth-grade boy read a poem about Christopher Columbus over the intercom. Everyone in the school said the Pledge of Allegiance together. Then it was time for school to begin. But Goony Bird wasn't there. Well, Mrs. Pigeon said, let's take out our social studies books, class. Let's turn to the chapter called Cities. But Goony Bird isn't here, Nicholas said. No, Mrs. Pigeon said she isn't. She seems to be absent today. Maybe she has a chicken pox. The class was silent. The room seemed sad. The light seemed dim. Even the Gorbals, who usually scurried noisily around the cage, were very subdued. Subdued. Boys and girls, I wonder what subdued means. Let's talk about it later today. George Washington, in his portrait on the wall, looked as if he might cry any minute. Slowly, the children took out their social studies books from their desks and turned to the chapter called Cities. Kiko began to cry very quietly. I don't want to do social studies, she whimpered. I feel too sad. Malcolm crawled under his desk and curled up in a ball. I wonder why they feel so sad. I'm thinking they must really miss Goony Bird. Suddenly the door to the room burst open. It's Goony Bird, everyone called. The lights seemed to brighten. The Gorbals began to run in a circle, and George Washington seemed to smile. Goony Bird was out of breath. I'm sorry I'm late, she said. I am never ever late for anything. I always set 3 alarm clocks, and I'll lay out my clothes the night before, and I even put toothpaste in my toothbrush before I go to bed so that I can brush my teeth quickly in the morning. But today... Wait, she said. I can't even catch my breath. She stood in the front of the class and took a few deep breaths. There, she said. I'm fine now. She smoothed her red hair, which was flying all around, and tucked it behind her ears. Today Goony Bird was wearing gray sweatpants, a sleeveless white blouse with lace on the collar, and an amazing black gloves that came up to her elbows. This morning, she exclaimed, I quite unexpectedly had to direct an orchestra. An orchestra, Mrs. Pigeon? Asked Mrs. Pigeon. Yes, a symphony orchestra. Mrs. Pigeon smiled. I hear all sorts of interesting excuses for tardiness, but I've never heard one like that before. I believe I'm quite unique, Goony Bird said. Yes, you are indeed. Did you wear your gloves when you were directing the orchestra? Yes, Goony Bird said. As a matter of fact, I did. I found them very helpful. All the second graders had their hands in the air, and they were pretending to lead the orchestra. Even Malcolm was back in his seat, using 2 pencils as an orchestra balance. Goony Bird headed towards the desk. She looked around at the other children's books. I see we're in the middle of social studies, she said. Mrs. Pigeon slipped one foot out of the high-heeled shoes and rubbed it with her hand. Then she put her shoe back on. Actually, she said, I think the class would appreciate it if we had held story time a little bit early today. Yay! Called all the children, and they closed up their social studies books. A Goony Bird story? Goony Bird asked. Yes, Miss Pigeon said. Yes, the children said. Goony Bird smoothed her long gloves. She went back up to the front of the room. Which one would you like today? She asked. How Catwoman was consumed by a cow? I'd certainly like to hear about Catwoman and a cow, Miss Pigeon said, but maybe tomorrow. But this morning I'd like to hear one called Why Gooney was late for school because she had to direct an symphony orchestra. Oh, Gooney said. All right, I could tell that. And it will be absolutely true? Asked Mrs. Pigeon. Of course, Gooney said. Have you forgotten? All of my stories are absolutely true. Then she curtsied and began. Why Gooney was late for school because she was directing a symphony orchestra. Once upon a time. In fact, it was this morning Gooney got all dressed up in clothes that she had carefully laid out the night before. I love that beginning. She ate her breakfast, brushed her teeth with her pre-pasted toothbrush, gathered up her homework, put on her elbow-length gloves, and started off to the Watertown Elementary School. Gooney interrupted herself. She explained to the teacher in the class, sometimes stories start in the most extraordinary way. Then they become exciting when something unexpected happens. Don't you find that to be true? The children all nodded, thinking about their favorite stories. Like Where the Wild Things Are, Ben suggested. Or Little Red Riding Hood, Beanie said. When the wolf appears and you don't expect it. Oh, I'm so scared of the wolf, Kiko whispered loudly. Every time the wolf appears, Shh, the children said, and Gooney continued. Gooney walked down Park Street and turned the corner onto Walnut Street. When she was halfway down Walnut Street, halfway to school, suddenly she paused. I've explained before, she said, about the word suddenly. It makes things exciting. Sometimes, class, if you're creating a story and you get stuck, just say the word suddenly, and you won't have any trouble continuing at all. What a good idea, Mrs. Pigeon said. We should all start a list of good writing tips. What happened suddenly on Walnut Street, Gooney continued. Suddenly she saw an enormous red and white bus coming very slowly. Each window had a head in it. The bus was quite full of people. Gooney was amazed. Even though she had lived in Watertown only a short time, about a week, she knew that Watertown did not have an enormous red and white buses. Watertown had 2 medium-sized yellow school buses, Gooney knew. And she knew also that one of the Watertown churches had a small white bus, really long van, and that had a rainbow painted on it and said, Jesus is the Lord on the side of it. But an enormous red and white bus was completely new to Watertown. As Gooney watched, it moved very, very slowly down Water Street. She could see that the driver, though he was steering carefully, was also trying to look at a map in his hands. The bus driver saw Gooney and he beeped his horn, a very small beep. He pulled the bus to a stop and breathed really sound of brakes. Then he pushed the handle to open the front folding door. Excuse me, the bus driver said. You look as if you were on your way to school. Yes, I am, Gooney replied. And I certainly don't want to be late. I am never, ever late. The bus driver looked as if he might begin to cry. I feel exactly the same way, he said. I am never, ever late. But this morning I have a terrible problem. He held up his folded map. Do you need help folding the map, Gooney asked. It is hard to fold a map, but I find that if you follow the creases very carefully. No, the bus driver said, my problem is that I'm lost. Oh dear, Gooney said. The bus driver might be a person in a story. You should be right now trying to find the word the driver up here and write it as a character on your paper. The driver continued, we are going to be late for a concert. A concert? Yes, I have an entire symphony orchestra on this bus. Gooney paused. Questions about orchestra, she asked class. Barry Tuckman was waving his hand wildly. We know all the parts of an orchestra. We listened to a young person's guide to the orchestra. Winds, Ben called. Strings, Tricia called. She pretended to play an imaginary violin. Brass, Chelsea called. She tried to make a trombone noise, but not very successfully. Percussion, said Malcolm loudly, and he began to tap 2 pencils in rhythm on his desk. And Barry called out, his hand still waving, we listened to Peter and the Wolf. Oh, Kiko said in a small voice, I hate when Peter and the Wolf comes. Every time the wolf appears, Shh, the children said. Gooney continued. So, Gooney climbed up the steps and got into the bus. Every seat was filled. There were men and women all over the bus. All of them were dressed in black. All the men were wearing black turtlenecks. All the women were wearing long black skirts. They definitely look like an orchestra, but they look very distressed. Well, where are you supposed to go, Goody Bird? Asked the bus driver. To the town hall auditorium, he said. We are supposed to play a concert there this morning. He looked at his watch. It begins in 20 minutes, he said, in a worried voice. I will get you there, Goody Bird said. The bus driver called to the orchestra players. Orchestra players. Where does that go, boys and girls? Think about where it goes. I think orchestra players goes in one of your boxes. Where does orchestra players go? Are they characters, setting, a problem, or a solution? You should pause it, boys and girls, because I think there's a problem in the story right now. What's happening on the bus? What problem do the orchestra players and the bus driver have? Please pause it and write your problem here. We're going to find a solution soon. He nodded. Yes, he said. We will do that. One by one, the musicians thanked Goody Bird. If you don't want to play orchestra players, you could also write the word musicians somewhere on the paper. They thanked Goody Bird. Ooh, hold on 1 second. Uh-oh, should go to hit pause, boys and girls. Okay, boys and girls. This wonderful girl is going to direct us, he said. Yay, the orchestra players all called. Luckily, even though she lived in Watertown only for 1 week, Goody Bird knew exactly where the town hall auditorium was because her father had pointed it out when they drove around the town. There is the hospital, her father had said. Go there if you happen to fall from a ladder and break your arm. There's a police station, he said. Go there if you happen to see a bank robbery on the loose. And there's the town hall auditorium, her father had said. Go there if you want to see a ballet or a concert. Start the bus, Goody Bird told the driver, and turn right at the very next corner. It was a good thing that she was wearing her long black gloves. When she was pointing, everyone could see her long black pointing finger. There was no place for Goody Bird to sit down, and we all know that it's dangerous to stand up while the bus is going. But then she had no choice. She stood behind the driver and held on to the very side of the seat. He promised to drive very carefully. Next turn left, Goody Bird said, and pointed. And there we are, she told him. See that large brick building? This is the town hall auditorium. Yay, the orchestra players all called. Then women began to comb their hair. Thank you for directing us, they all said to Goody Bird as they got out of the bus. The driver had opened the luggage compartment and was lifting out cellos. You will be late to school, one man said as he picked up a large black case. Trombone, he explained. Yes, I will, Goody Bird said. I will be tardy. Tardy is another word for late, boys and girls. Is there some way that we can thank you for leading our orchestra? He asked. Goody Bird thought for a moment. Finally, she thought of a way. She whispered it to the trombone player. He nodded. Yes, he said. We will do that. One by one, the musicians thanked Goody Bird. She said goodbye and hurried to the street to Watertown Elementary School. She arrived at school just as the class was about to read cities in their social studies books. The end. Questions, anyone? Goody Bird asked. Was there a drum player? Malcolm asked. Yes, Goody Bird said. Every single part of the symphony orchestra was there, even a harp. Oh, Malcolm said, sighing. I wish I could have been a drum player. I love drums. You will, Goody Bird said. Was there a flute player? Chelsea asked. Two, Goody Bird said. I wish I could hear the flute players, Chelsea said. You will, Goody Bird said. I'm thinking, why does she keep saying you will? Why does she keep saying you will see that? I wonder what Goody Bird means. Boys and girls, on a post-it note, I would like you to tell me why you think she keeps saying you will to the boys and girls. Hit pause. Why do they keep saying you will? He asked, I wish I could have seen a drum player. You will. What does that mean? Was there a flute? 2. I wish I could hear the flute players. You will, Goonybird said. Please hit pause, take out a Post-it note, and write down why you think that they will. She's saying you will. What does Goonybird mean? Welcome back, boys and girls. I have a question, Goonybird, Mrs. Pigeon said. What was it that you whispered to the trombone player? Secret, Goonybird said, but you find out at 12 o'clock sharp. That's lunchtime, Mrs. Pigeon pointed out. Precisely, Goonybird said. Now shall we all turn to social studies? All morning the children and Mrs. Pigeon, too, glanced again and again at the big clock on the wall. They did social studies and arithmetic and had a snack right in the middle of the morning. Then they did a reading and art. Finally, just as the clock had moved to 12 o'clock, the second graders were about to reach to their lunchboxes. Goonybird announced, "Here they are." She pointed to the large windows on the side of the classroom, and the children stood up and watched through the windows as the red and white buses pulled up and parked. When the door of the bus opened, the orchestra players came out one by one holding their instruments. They arranged themselves in a semicircle on the lawn facing the Watertown Elementary School. The conductor was holding a ballet, stepping out at the center and lifted his arms. Too bad he doesn't have long black gloves, Goonybird murmurs. Mrs. Pigeon opened the windows so that they could hear better. The orchestra began to play a slow, steadily melody. And when it was finished, the conductor bowed. Then he turned to the windows and explained. That was a sarabelle. It's a kind of a dance. We'll play it one more time in honor of Goonybird Green. So the orchestra played the short ballet again, and the children danced around the classroom in a very serious and graceful way. Okay, boys and girls, I would like you to make sure that right now you have filled out the characters of this small short story. Where were the characters the whole time? What is the setting? Where were they? I don't want you to write down they were in the school. Where were the characters in the whole story, boys and girls? What was the problem? And how did they figure out the solution? What happened? What was the solution? How did they fix their problem? Okay, boys and girls, we're going to go over this later. Thank you so much. Take your time. Don't forget to do all 4 boxes. Okay?